Hi guys. So this week we're going to be just introducing ancient Egypt and you're going to be completing a timeline as the weekly task. So Egypt was home to one of the most advanced civilizations of the world, lasting from 3100 BCE to 30 BCE, when it was conquered by the Romans. It was protected from invaders by deserts and fed by the fertile farmland on the banks of the Nile. The Egyptian civilization survived for thousands of years with few major changes. So it lasted for a very long time. And the reason why it lasted for so long is because it was surrounded by so much desert and it was very hard to get to for certain countries. So the legacy of the ancient Egyptians. So the ancient Egyptians left behind many clues about their way of life, from giant temples and pyramids to statues, paintings, mummies, and picture writing known as hieroglyphics. And you can see in the picture that's in the background there, this is a temple, and on those little columns there they had the hieroglyphics and the pictures that are prevalent in ancient Egyptian society. So where is Egypt? So Egypt is actually in northeastern Africa. So Egypt is bordered by the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, and you can see that in the picture there. So the Mediterranean Sea is at the top and then the Red Sea is on the right. Libya is to the west, the Sudan is to the south, Israel and the Gaza Strip are to the east. So Egypt covers 386,662 square miles and is almost twice the size of France and 12th largest country in Africa. So it's pretty big. So the Nile River Valley and Delta is the home of one of the most principal civilizations of the ancient Middle East, ancient Egypt, and is important to their survival. So it's really important that you know that the Nile is the very center of Egypt. Geographically, no it's not, but it is very, very important, and you're going to learn about that in the coming weeks. You're also going to learn more about where it is, but what we're going to do first is we're going to watch a video on the Nile.
Ancient Egypt was called the gift of the Nile because the river was so important to life in the region. The Nile River is the longest in the world, flowing north from the equator to the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile's floodwaters deposited rich soil and created the fertile Nile Valley, the birthplace of Egyptian civilization. Reed and wooden boats carried merchants' goods along the river. They paddled north with the gently moving current. Let's climb on board and take a journey with them. Our first stop is at Abu Simbel, where the pharaoh Ramses II built a temple, complete with 4 66-foot statues of himself. Pharaohs were considered to be living gods and built spectacular tombs and temples in honor of themselves. As we travel downstream, we come to the first cataract. A canal has been dug so that our boat can navigate around these rocky rapids and waterfalls. The Nile is home to many kinds of fish and other wildlife. Ancient Egyptians fished and hunted birds. Some even speared the dangerous hippopotamuses and crocodiles that lived on the river. During Egypt's peak, Thebes was the capital. Here, Queen Hatshepsut, the first woman pharaoh, had a temple built in her honor. It was carved out of the wall of a cliff. The Egyptians used irrigation to expand their farmlands. They grew fruits and vegetables and harvested wheat, which they ground into flour for bread. They also used fiber from flax plants to make linen cloth. After we float by Memphis, an old capital of Egypt, we pass the burial sites at Giza. Here sits the mighty Sphinx, an enormous stone creature with the face of an ancient pharaoh. Finally, we come to the end of the Nile, where it empties into the Mediterranean Sea. This triangular area at the mouth of the river is called a delta. Had our journey covered the entire length of the Nile, we would have traveled 4,160 miles.
So, that's just a general introduction of ancient Egypt. What we're going to be doing this week is doing a timeline. So a timeline is an easy way to show events in the order that they happened. So listing events in the order that they happened is also called chronological order. So a timeline is broken up into even periods of time. When looking at a timeline, you need to find out if the timeline you are reading is broken up into days, months, years, decades, so 10 years, or centuries, 100 years. In some cases, the timeline might contain the letters BCE, before Common Era, and CE, Common Era. We are currently in 2020 CE, but we don't actually say CE, we just say 2020. Before 0, which is what we see in that little picture there, we actually have BCE, and that's the time of the ancient Egyptians. So the following video examines an overview of timelines.
Creating a timeline. What did you do yesterday? When you were thinking about the events of yesterday, most likely you start with waking up and then going to bed and everything in between. You did things in order. The events in history can also be written down in order, from the beginning of time until today. One of the best ways to show events in time is by using a timeline. A timeline is a graph showing the passage of time on a straight line. It can be horizontal or vertical. Here's an example of a timeline showing some events in the United States. In 1945, World War II ends. 1955, the first McDonald's opens up. In 1965, Pop-Tarts are created. In 1975, the Vietnam War ends. In 1995, the San Francisco 49ers win the Super Bowl. In 2005, the 6th Harry Potter book came out. And in 2015, the movie Jurassic World opened up. Here's some things to remember when making a timeline. A timeline can be created using years, months, days, or even hours as the time periods. They can contain images, pictures, or other drawings related to the events. A timeline can start and end at any time, or show 1 year, 1 month, or 1 day in history. Timelines can be about a person's life, events in history, inventions, or just about anything that shows information during the passage of time. The spaces between time periods should match the time. For example, notice this timeline. It shows every 10 years, except there is a larger gap or interval between 1975 and 1995, because 20 years have passed. Timelines can be fun, and they're easy to create. In this example, we are going to create a vertical timeline. Step 1. What events will the timeline show? In this example, we're going to use the life of a child. Step 2. What time periods will be used? We're going to use years. Step 3. What are the intervals? In this example, they will be changing depending on the year. Step 4. Will there be images or drawings? Yes, there will be some images. Step 5. Create the timeline. Decide whether it will be vertical or horizontal. In this example, we're going to do a vertical timeline. The timeline shows the events in the child's life, from when they were born until the present time, starting 3rd grade at a new school. Of course, many other events could be added to the timeline, such as the first tooth, beginning kindergarten, or other important events in the child's life. Timelines show the order of events in a person's life or history. They give some information about an event and are easy to follow along. Creating a timeline is as easy as drawing a straight line with a ruler. What was the most important event in your life that can be on a timeline? Why was it important?
So we're going to have a look at the timeline of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt isn't all about pyramids and hieroglyphs. What we're going to do is we're going to take a very long trip back to 7,500 BCE, or before the Common Era, to find out more about the ancient Egyptians. So the first Egyptian settlers arrived in the Nile Valley around 7,500 BCE. The climate in Egypt at the time was much wetter and the valley was green. The settlers arrived by eating wild plants and animals they hunted. As the climate became drier and the area turned to desert, the settlers moved closer to the River Nile to farm the land along its banks. The first Egyptian kings increased trade and distributed food throughout Egypt. They needed to communicate and keep records, so they used hieroglyphs, a language of symbols. The ancient Egyptians were able to pass on their knowledge, history and beliefs by writing on tomb walls and on a special paper scroll made from the papyrus plant. So the Egyptian state, and this is around 2950 BCE. So King Nama, or the warrior king Menes, as he was also known, was the first Egyptian pharaoh to rule over a united Upper and Lower Egypt. He built the city of Memphis and made it his capital. King Nama began the era of dynasties in Egypt. A dynasty means that over many years the kings and queens of a country are from the same family. The first pyramid. So the first pyramid to be built was the Step Pyramid in Saqqara. This was built from sandstone, encased in limestone for the pharaoh Nosir, who reigned from around 2650 BCE and stands at over 70 meters tall. The Egyptians believed if they mummified the dead pharaoh's body and protected it in a pyramid, he would live forever in the afterlife. The Giza Pyramids. So the Giza Pyramids were built around 2555 to 2450 BCE for the kings Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure. I could have said them wrong, I apologise. These pyramids are in the dry desert across the River Nile, from Egypt's huge current capital city, Cairo. The largest, the Great Pyramid, was built between 2555 and 2539 BCE for Pharaoh Khufu and stands at 146 meters tall, with each side measuring nearly 200 meters in length. So the Great Pyramid is almost double, actually it is more than double, the Step Pyramid. So we're moving through to the pyramid texts. So magic spells were discovered written on the walls of Pyramid King Unas at Saqqara. These spells, known as the pyramid texts, were thought to protect the dead king from danger. They give us an important insight into the ancient Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife and the ascent of the pharaoh into the sky after his death. Dating from around 2335 BCE, they are believed to be one of the oldest known writings in the world. The Valley of the Kings. So, from 1539 until 1069 BCE, the Egyptian kings decided to build their elaborate tombs in the Valley of the Kings. The mummies of pharaohs were buried with their jewels and riches, as it was believed that they could take these with them into the afterlife. So far, 63 tombs have been discovered in the Valley of the Kings, but most have been looted by tomb robbers. Tourists can still visit the tombs of Ramses II and Tutankhamun here. So, the reason why it's called the Valley of the Kings is because so many pharaohs were actually buried at this point, right? So they all made sure that they were buried in such a way that they would ascend into the heavens. One of the pharaohs was Queen Hatshepsut, and she was one of the few female pharaohs that existed in ancient Egypt. She ruled Egypt from 1473 until 1458 BCE after the death of her husband, who was also her half-brother. It's a little wrong, but okay. As a woman, she faced many challenges, but she succeeded by acting not as a queen, but as a king. So we'll have a look at what she did. So she dressed in traditionally male clothes and even wore a false beard. During her reign, she built a magnificent tomb in the Valley of the Kings, but her mummy was stolen after her death. All that remains of her body is her liver, which was found in a canoptic jar. And this here is a canoptic jar. So canoptic jars with heads representing the 4 sons of Horus were used by the ancient Egyptians to protect the organs removed from mummified kings and queens. We'll go to this one. Tutankhamun is probably the most famous pharaoh that most of you know. And this is because his tomb was discovered in 1922 by a team of British archaeologists with the mummy, sarcophagus, and wondrous treasures almost intact. Scientists believe that he was only 18 years old when he died in 1322 BCE. The cause of his death remains a mystery, and the reason why his was so famous is because the tomb robbers didn't get into his tomb and take everything that's there, and that's why he's so famous, because we know so much about his treasures and what he left behind. He wasn't necessarily the most famous at the time of his life, but he certainly was famous in history in regards to what he has left behind that is still intact. So Ramses II. So Ramses II was 30 years old when he became the king of Egypt, and he reigned for a staggering 67 years. He was known as Ramses the Great because he fought in a great war for Egypt and also brought peace to the country. Egypt became very wealthy and prosperous during his reign. He had many wives. Remarkably, he was a father to 111 sons and 51 daughters. The Tanis treasure. So this treasure belonged to the kings of the 21st dynasty. And we looked at the first dynasty earlier on in 7500 BCE. It is now in the Cairo Museum and was found in their tombs at Tanis in 1939 to 1940. Then we start having people from outside of Egypt come in. And Alexander the Great in 332 BCE conquered Egypt and was hailed as a pharaoh and a god by the Egyptian people. Alexander founded the city of Alexandria and made it his capital city. After Alexander died, his close friend General Ptolemy became king and founded his Egyptian dynasty. This dynasty ruled Egypt for the next 300 years. So the Rosetta Stone. And some of you would have seen the hieroglyphs and probably may have even tried to replicate them. The reason why we know how to read the hieroglyphs is because of the Rosetta Stone. So it was carved in 196 BCE and displays 3 different forms of writing: Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and a cursive form of Egyptian called Demotic. It was found in 1799 by French soldiers building at Rosetta in Egypt. So let's have a look at that. So Jean-Francois Champollion finally decoded the carvings in 1822 by comparing the hieroglyphs with the accompanying Greek text, since the information has been used to understand ancient scriptures. Cleopatra. And some of you may even know about Cleopatra. Cleopatra the 7th was the last pharaoh of Egypt and ruled from 51 to 30 BCE. During her reign, she had a child with Julius Caesar, the leader of Rome. His relationship with Cleopatra, together with the rumor that he wanted to become king, angered the Romans, and he was murdered in 44 BCE. After Caesar's death, Cleopatra fell in love with Mark Antony, who was the successor to the Roman Empire. However, Mark Antony gave countries belonging to the Roman Emperor to Cleopatra and her children, which the Romans did not agree with. Safe to say, it did not end well. So a powerful Roman, named Octavian, defeated Mark Antony in battle at Actium. Mark Antony later took his own life and died in the arms of Cleopatra. She was captured by Octavian and ended her own life in age 39. The death of Cleopatra ended an era in Egyptian history, and in 30 BCE, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. So they were no longer part of the... So, the task you'll be doing this week is to create a timeline. And what you'll need to do is open up your textbook to pages 10.1, Ancient Egyptian Timeline, 282-283. And it looks like that. It's also on the screen there. Alright, and what you're going to do is examine the different events that occurred in ancient Egyptian history. And you can look through that on your own. What you'll need to do next is go to that website. And that website's going to be in the weekly plan. And you type in your full name and the project title and click Start. Some students may need to click Run Flash to use this site. You can do it in a Word document if you wish, but this just makes it a little bit easier. You're then to add at least 10 of the events shown on pages 282 to 283 of your textbook to the online timetable. So what you do first is you click on the timeline where you'd like your event to go. So I would probably start with the first one. When the box appears, put the year in the label box and the description in the short description box. Then click tick. You can add a picture if you would like, and that's completely up to you. It also looks better if you do. You may need to shorten the description because there's only a certain amount of letters you can put in. You don't need to put anything in the full description box because it doesn't appear. You then keep adding events from the text. Remember, you need to have at least 10 to fill out your timeline, but don't hit finish yet. We need to add more events. So in another tab on the internet, you are to search online and find at least 5 additional ancient Egyptian significant events that occurred during this time and add these to your timeline. So I've got there, I've typed in significant events in ancient Egypt, but you could type in a timeline of ancient Egypt and go from that. Remember to pick events in BCE. You don't want anything that's in the Common Era, which is where we're currently at. So you need to add at least 5 of these significant events to your timeline. Make sure that they're placed chronologically on the timeline. So remember, it goes down to 0 for BCE. But don't click finish yet. You're then to go to Microsoft Teams and you need to add one of your additional timeline events that you found on Google and add it to the Microsoft Teams page. Whilst you're there, you are to find 3 additional events that your classmates have posted and add them to your timeline. So you'll post one online, and then what you'll do is you will then look and see what other people have put in, and then you will add that to your timeline. Remember to give them a thumbs up if you have used it, so you get a general idea of how many people have used your particular timeline event. If you're in my classes, you may remember that you get points that contribute to your house for contributing online, so I do recommend that you do that. You then need to add at least 3 of the events to your timeline. Make sure they're in chronological order. Your final timeline will have at least 18 events, so make sure you have 18. Once you have 18, you can click finish. Of course, you can add more. Once you've clicked finish, this box will appear. So you click on Save Final button and it will save the timeline as a PDF. Once you've saved it, you upload the timeline to Compass Learning Tasks, Humanities Distance Learning Week 2. And I've put an arrow to it and that's what it looks like. Once you've done this, you have finished the required work for Humanities for the week. You may want to try the extension activities for Humanities to learn more. And this is what they are. So the extension or enrichment tasks. If you want to extend yourself, you may want to pick one of the significant events on your timeline and write a small report. It doesn't need to be more than a page. You can have pictures of what happened, when it happened, and why it was significant. And you'd also upload that to the week 2 Compass learning tasks. Remember, you also get points if you do the extension activities. Only if you're in my class anyway. So, the enrichment tasks you can do. If you want to learn more about ancient Egypt, you may want to go to the YouTube channel and take a virtual reality tour of the major sites in Egypt. The link is also in the weekly plan, but it's a 360 virtual reality tour of the various locations in Egypt that were built during those times. So that's pretty much it. Those 2 tasks are optional. You don't have to do them, but it is a good idea to do them if you want to learn more. Next week we'll be looking at the mapping of ancient Egypt, its location and things like that, which we briefly touched on today. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me or one of your teachers, and we'd be more than happy to help. Have a good week.